Hello, and welcome to Ask Lovecraft After Dark. We are joined tonight by a very special guest, Rose O'Keefe, who's the chief editor at Eraserhead Press, a delightful publishing company, an award-winning company that I've been aware of ever since one of my cheekier friends loaned me a copy of Shatnerquake. We are really excited to have Rose on. Rose, welcome.
Thanks, Lehman. Nice to see you.
Yeah, like many of the guests we've had on, Rose and I got to know each other when we were both at CthulhuCon, put on by the Callahans from our last episode. But as I mentioned, Eraserhead has been a company that I've been following and looking at and seeing lots of my friends involved with, and they are a little different. Just a warning for tonight. This is probably going to be one of our more explicit episodes, if for no other reason than I'm going to have to read some of the titles put out by Eraserhead Press. Such delightful stories as Jack and Mr. Grin, the Shark Hunting in Paradise Garden, Rampaging Fuckers of Everything on the Crazy Shitting Planet of the Vomit Atmosphere, Sunset with a Beard, Pickled Apocalypse of Pancake Island, Christmas on Crack, Amazing Stories of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, Gargoyle Girls of Spider Island, and many, many more. Rose, tell us a bit about Eraserhead Press and just what it is you people are up to over there.
Well, Eraserhead Press is an independent publisher with a focus on bizarro fiction. And we've been publishing novels and novellas since 1999. So we're nearly 20 years old. And we have just we're just in love with weird fiction, bizarro stuff, really out there, transgressive, unusual things, and have a lot of fun with it. And so that's what we do.
And bizarro, okay, so bizarro is a term that I kind of came to, I want to say, just through like weird indie comics and kind of those disturbing comics like Robert Crumb and things like that. But it's, I feel like it's one of those terms that gets thrown around and there's a kind of ambiguity to it. For the sake of our audience, when you say bizarro, what are you referring to?
Yeah, great question. So the way that I look at bizarro fiction is really all about the audience that is looking for it. So it's a genre of fiction, and it's a way of classifying the things that are somewhat the literary equivalent of cult films or Adult Swim cartoons or things that are more surreal and offbeat. But what really draws me to the type of fiction is that no matter how weird it is and how maybe cartoonish or surreal or science fictional, at its core, there's some allegory for people living in our present day, and that's what I think is so important about bizarro fiction as a genre and as an art form, is that it gives a vehicle for authors to convey a story, just like all good science fiction does, or speculative fiction, that kind of holds a mirror up to our reality in a twisted and unusual kind of way to eke out a sensation of something that isn't able to be approached more directly.
Did you come to Eraserhead from sort of a background in publishing, or as sort of someone who was interested in the bizarre and the strange? Kind of, what was your approach into that?
Absolutely the second thing that you said. So I was really just a fan of all sorts of unusual and weird things. I was a very weird kid. I was raised by hippie parents. I learned to meditate when I was 4. I was exposed to all sorts of different people and different sort of ideas. So it wasn't so much that I considered these things weird as I was just drawn to them as interesting. And it wasn't until I got a little older that I started realizing that the things that I found interesting were what other people thought were weird. And so that's kind of where I got into it. And then I met a bunch of people in around 2000 that were writing this kind of stuff. It actually, the first time I read bizarro fiction, it actually made me feel seasick. Like I wasn't sure what I was reading. And it wasn't because it was experimental, and it wasn't because it was like necessarily sickening. it just kind of opened up my brain in a different way.
And then how did you go from being the fan to being the person who is now, carving through slush piles, having to, put together books, put together author lists, organize conventions, sort of how did that all develop?
Well, it was quite an evolution. As you can imagine, I just sort of learned as I went. I was very ambitious, a young, aspiring entrepreneur that noticed people around me doing really cool things that had very little sense of how to actually organize themselves or run a business. And so I saw my opportunity in that and could just sort of asserted myself where I found needed until my career evolved into what it is. So, first I was just kind of supporting and helping see what was happening because there was this collective of authors, 6 authors, that had this new idea based around print-on-demand technology, which was very new at that time. And the idea was that they would form a collective called Eraserhead Press Collective and help edit and promote and publish each other's work, where they would profit share. So the author would get 50% and the other 5 people would get 10%. And that all sounded great, except for that there was no real accountability as far as who was going to do what. And so some people felt like they were carrying most of the weight, and other people were looking at them like, hey, what are you doing for me? And it just kind of fell apart as a collective. But what I saw is that what they were doing, the actual writing, the actual art of it, was amazing and needed to be supported. And I knew that there was an audience hungry for it, like I was, because I wasn't finding stuff like that to read. And so the person that had kind of started it acquired some debt, and I paid off that debt and took ownership of the company, and then slowly molded it into what I wanted, which is essentially similar in the sense that it's very author friendly. We still give authors 50% of the profits of their books. We are, we really care a lot about uh, the the collective spirit of the thing, and we all help each other out because that's our whole philosophy. Is the more people help each other, the more all people succeed. And but now it is actually run like a business.
Now, at any point, did David Lynch send you a cease and desist, or were you guys able to kind of, fly under his radar?
I've never had a conversation with David Lynch about it, but I wouldn't imagine that he's offended in any way. I'm certain that he's heard of us. I was really inspired by his work, and I'm a huge fan. And I'm a kid that was raised in the transcendental meditation community, and he has such a connection to that I think that he would understand that I'm paying tribute.
Now, you've mentioned now, growing up in the transcendental meditation community, learning meditation as a young child. Has that actually come to help in the sort of stressful world of editing, where you're sort of, having to not only wrangle authors but wrangle artists and trying to get stuff out on a schedule? I mean, it's a very high stress, high maintenance kind of life. Has meditation help in sort of centering and bringing things kind of into a bit of a calm eye in the middle of the storm?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. And I think that anyone that you talk to that practices meditation, that's kind of one of its greatest benefits is being able to calm your mind and center yourself during stress. And I think that learning that as a child, it's just part of my natural sensibility. So I don't know if it's helped. I mean, I'd say yes, but it's kind of like, does brushing your teeth help? Like, it's kind of a thing, you know? Yeah, I think it's
Fair enough.
essential. Uh-huh.
Well, learning as you said, you kind of learning the business as it's gone along. What have been some of the sort of the major lessons along the way? I guess a few missteps that might have helped educate you, and for folks who are also interested in publishing, things that they can kind of learn from. Again, you guys have been around for now, as you said, almost 20 years. I mean, that's a long way for when so many companies fold up within just months.
Yeah, so missteps that might help people. That's a great question. And kind of broad. Let me see if I can think of a way into it. If you're someone who is aspiring as a publisher, or if if you've been publishing for a while and you're curious about my advice on anything specific, reach out to me, because, as I said, I love helping people, and that's definitely my attitude toward it. But yeah, there's definitely been setbacks. I would say that, as in any entrepreneurial venture, um, key things are resilience, tenacity, persistence. You have to have ambition and the willingness to stick with something. And things haven't always been on the upswing in the course of a 20-year history. And I've really grown more comfortable with the cyclical nature of things, and come to expect that there will be really amazing times, and then there'll be other times that are really trying. And some of the challenging times can actually be some of the most exciting and informative, because they really teach you what you're made of. You really have to. I would say owning a business, it challenges you in all of the best ways, because you're only as good as your own weaknesses, and the weaknesses of your team. So it's just a willingness to see things through and learn from your mistakes is just the general advice that I would have.
Fantastic. Now, with this history, comes, I imagine, a lot of community expectation. Looking through your list, you've got a lot of authors, who've put out a lot of amazing work. With Bizarro, I feel like there's a bit of a license to do new and strange and weird things, but people also like what they like, and there's a reason why Robert Jordan and George R. R. Martin and all these books, kind of all get sort of cranked out. Do you find there's that same tension to sort of do what people are expecting and are used to, but also finding new and novel ways to surprise them?
That's a good way of describing it. Sure. Uh, yeah, I think that the most interesting thing about doing, publishing unique and surprising books, because that's exactly what we do, is figuring out what is unique and surprising, and that may surprise you. No, but it's like, oftentimes people will send me the same sort of tropes or the same things that I've seen a bunch of times, and say, oh my gosh, this is like the most bizarro thing you'll ever read. And it's not. It's like, that is a big challenge, is like finding the things that take it to the next level, and then um and yeah, it's like,
Well,
the
because
people.
you have an interesting sort of mixture. You have kind of a stable of writers. I'm thinking of Carlton Mellick III,
Uh-huh.
Jeff Burke. Folks who you've been working with for, it looks like, a very long time. But it seems that you're also trying to find new voices, and that has to be a bit of tension between kind of your the kind of old guard and new guard, and kind of bouncing between the two.
Yeah, well, I don't choose the books that I publish based on those elements
Okay.
necessarily. I mean, it's true that there's regular authors that I tend to work with frequently that tend to create awesome work that I always love, and then I'm always looking for new people, and yeah, that's how it goes. But the primary, like, guiding principle for myself is, what do I find interesting, and what do I think that other people are going to find interesting? And I think that I've always been kind of that person who is, like in college, you have a friend who's finding the weird movies and they want to share them with everybody, or these unusual books, or like these places to take you to, or just, like, I'm always one of those people that's looking for that stuff that no one else has really caught on to yet. And it's because of my own curiosity and my own interests in those things. And then I love to tell other people about them, get them excited, and bring them in on it. So that personality naturally suits the role of publisher, because that's essentially what I'm doing with books.
Well, and it seems like you're helped by the fact that there is such a great community. I know you're going to be involved with the HB Lovecraft Film Festival. We had like I said, the Callahans on just 2 weeks ago. How did you sort of form that relationship, and what's it like being out there in that kind of community of artists and writers and filmmakers and con organizers and the like?
Oh man, that's like my primary passion is surrounding myself with passionate, creative, enthusiastic people. And Brian and Gwen are two of those very people. And I love the festival that they do, the HP Lovecraft Film Festival. I've been going since I think as long as they have, since around 2002 or something. And so it's really great connecting with all of those folks. And I tend to find myself, or I put myself in places that I can interact with those people as frequently as possible. And, over the years, we've built up a community here in Portland that crosses all sorts of Venn diagrams, but it's all unusual sorts and people that are open-minded and into things that are different. And yeah, so that was kind of two-part answer to a two-part question. What was the core of that question?
You got to the core of it.
Okay.
I'm excited yeah, you're going to be involved with the HP Lovecraft Film Festival. What can folks find? I guess that's happening in about a week or so from when this goes out.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm really excited about it because not only do you get to see the films, there's feature films, there's short films, but there's also the gaming and there's the panels and author readings and signings, and then there's like extracurricular stuff and parties and music. I mean, it's just a great festival, and it all takes place at like this beautiful historic theater in Portland, the Hollywood Theater, which I love to go to anyway. And yeah, it's a great crowd. So I'm looking forward to having our books there because we get a lot of return customers who always ask me what's new. In fact, last year I hadn't done a great job like uh, stocking prior to the event. I just thought, oh, well, I'll sell whatever I have left over. And when I got there, everybody was like, where's the new stuff? Where's the new Bizarro? We've been waiting. So this year I'm bringing it all, and you can find us there in the theater at the HB Lovecraft Film Fest. Yeah.
And will there be some of your authors present doing readings and signings and the like?
Oh yeah, thanks for reminding me that. There will be like quite a few people. I'm very excited that John Skip will be joining us. He is coming up from LA and is one of my editors on our imprint Fungasm Press. And then Cody Goodfellow will be there, Jeff Burke, Garrett Cook, and probably a few other people will be making appearances. So yeah, it'll be a great time.
You mentioned your imprints. So that's for those who may not be aware. So Eraserhead Press is not just sort of one kind of big static block, but you guys have a couple of different, I guess, imprints, different sort of publishing wings. Can you tell us a bit about each of those and sort of how they differ from each other?
Yeah, sure. So just like Bizarro Fiction focuses on an audience that is looking for unusual, surprising, surreal, and different kind of books, we also have other imprints that are narrowly focused on specific audiences. So for people that like extreme horror, we have Deadite Press, and the editor of that is Jeff Burke. So each imprint is headed by a particular editor, which really makes it nice because then you get a kind of a curator of that editorial perspective, and you can connect up with, just as I was saying, I'm somebody who likes to find cool stuff and share them with you. Well, then you get Jeff's take on that with weird horror, and then similarly with Fungasm Press, it's John Skip's favorite books that he's found that bring the fun, and fun has a broad definition. I mean, some of it will make you weep.
And I think you guys also took over for Lazy Fascist Press when they went down. Is that correct? Are you
Yeah,
still
so Lazy Fascist has always been an imprint of
okay?
Eraserhead Press, and then when the editor stepped down, we closed that line for for future publications, but we still maintain the catalog of Lazy Fascist. Oh, and we also have the New Bizarro Author Series, of course, which is our line that focuses on new and upcoming voices specifically in Bizarro fiction. And every year we introduce our newest authors on that line.
All right. And is that one puts out collections as well, doesn't it?
Well, we have done some collections, but not on the New Bizarro Author series necessarily,
Okay,
unless we might have done a couple of single author collections.
right.
But yeah, it mainly focuses on novellas by authors who are either it's their first book, or maybe it's just their first Bizarro book, or they're just being introduced to the Bizarro fiction scene. And that line has built up quite a following of people who are just really curious about the newest people in Bizarro fiction, because there is something unique about that. Uh, I would say it's a little more raw, and um, and it's like unbridled imagination. Like these are maybe authors that aren't as seasoned, so you're seeing a real freshness, and that's what I really like about those voices.
And for folks, we have some folks who listen and who watch who are interested in writing and going into writing. If they're interested in either getting involved with Bizarro publishing, Bizarro writing, I guess you talked earlier a bit about folks sort of think, oh, I've got this thing and it's absolutely bizarre, and they send it in, and you're like, oh, well, I've got 18 books about tentacle brides of Sasquatch. What am I going to do with these? You sort of what are what are ways people can really kind of find and hone their voice and make something that is worth listening to, that makes something that is sort of new and surprising? What are real techniques you've seen over the years that have and have not worked?
Well, that's a great question. Um, I think that the first thing that you have to do is, of course, read widely so that you can get a sense of what's out there already. And it's just like in anything, if you're a poet, you should read a lot of poetry so that you can understand what's cliche and what's not. Or if you're in any genre, just understanding what it is that people are doing. But I like that you phrased that as far as what are specific techniques that I've seen work over the years for people maybe generating ideas or approaching things in a new way. And I'd say that it kind of boils down to a couple of different things. One, most of the authors that I end up working with, because they have successfully written something that is amazing and bizarro, are unusual thinkers to begin with. So you might know that you're a bizarro fiction writer if you end up getting a lot of comments about your work that people say it's too weird, or it just is reminiscent of maybe something else bizarro that they've read. But you wouldn't know if it's really good or different until you've read around. But let's see, where was I going with that? I think what I wanted to tell you is that you first be an individual, a different kind of a thinker. But then you really have to carve out the time and give yourself a chance to push past the first idea. Like usually the first idea that somebody comes up with is going to be the obvious one. So you want to think about, okay, what's not the obvious go-to idea? And then you want to push past that one because that's also too obvious. And then you want to get to the third one and you want to say, okay, this is kind of different, but how can I turn it upside down again? And so there's when I've taught people bizarro fiction before, I really boil it down to in a story, you have three elements. You have a character, a setting, and a conflict. And you can play around. You can make two of those things normal, and then one of them really weird. Or you could make two of them weird and one of them normal. Or you can make them all weird. But it's really about how they all interact together. And so what I see is people taking taking tropes and twisting them around, such as an example might be Ape Shit by Carlton Mellick III, which is a cabin in the woods story about the typical teenagers that go camping and, then a serial killer attacks them, Jason style, right? But in this story, it turns out that the teenagers are more fucked up and violent than the serial killer. So it kind of like turns it around, and the serial killer ends up being the one in danger. But also, more than that, is that every person in the story has their own reveal of like how you thought they were one way, but they were actually much weirder, or darker, and fucked up than you thought. And I mean, just like you already gave people the warning, so I'm just going to say, like, for instance, there's a woman that has an abortion fetish. Um, there's a vagina dentata in the book. I mean, and those sound kind of typical, so I don't know if I'm even hitting on it with that
just your
particular
typical
example.
stuff.
Just your typical vagina dentata. But no, there's like a lot of different ways that you can just flip things around until they're just much more unique than people would at first blush think. But it all has to play together. You have to have the right kind of character for the story and the right type of conflict for that character to really hit on the theme that you're going for. So when I say bizarro fiction, I'm not talking about fiction that doesn't lack any sense. Like, it still has a reason, it still has a purpose, it still has a logic within the world that is created. But it just is approaching it in a different way than normal stories do.
Oh, fantastic. Like I said, just your regular old garden variety abortion fetishes,
Yeah, yeah.
I imagine when you're having to go through slush piles, your sense of priority of like what's normal and what's not normal already gets slightly skewed. Has there been stuff that you've looked at and been like, this maybe this goes too far. Maybe this time we should have held back a little bit. Or do you tend to just push it to the limit and say, no, I want more vaginas next time, Peter Parker?
Well, you know, I
Because I
think
imagine
that's
a problem is that people think, okay, I'm going to give like shock value for the sake of shock value,
right.
and that's it. And it sort of becomes like torture porn, where you're like, okay, yep, it's really awful, but like there's no there.
Very good point. Yeah, I don't really go in for that. So it's not so much that I go, whoa, that's going too far, because I'm a very open-minded person. I mean, there are limits as far as I might have personal limits. Like, I'm not going to publish something I don't enjoy reading. So, I mean, if you write something that is uh, something that I don't enjoy reading, I'm not going to publish it, and that might be anything. But so I'm not going to limit what I don't like, just like I won't limit what I do like. But yeah, I would say that, like, when it comes to the shock value, that's not even over the years, that's been a real interesting issue for my company, because a lot of people will see titles like The Baby Jesus Butt Plug and think that we're just going for shock value until they read that book and find that it's actually kind of a sweet love story, but with zombies and stuff, and objectification of babies. But there's but that's not really the reason why I think books like that are effective is that there's something interesting about it. It's stimulating, it's intriguing. Maybe it's a social commentary, maybe it's parody. It has to be smart on some level, I just don't I don't go for just like any kind of offensiveness. That's not really the edge that I'm going for. I'm not trying to be offensive to people. I'm trying to entertain. I'm trying to give people a good time. I'm trying to give them stuff that they will enjoy reading and find some value in. And so if a book lacks that, then I'm not interested in it, whether or not it's offensive or not. Whether or not it's offensive.
Sure. Well, I'm really excited about what you guys have coming up. So can you give us a little taste about what we can expect out of Eraserhead over the next few months?
Oh my gosh. Well, I was telling you before we started this video that there are so many books coming out that I can't even list
Well,
them all.
I've got a list here if that'll help for at least stuff that's getting let's see. I think Sleazeland, is
Yeah.
that the one that just came out?
Sleazeland just came out.
Okay.
I'm excited about that one. I actually have it right here. Sleazeland by Cody Goodfellow. And so you can get this now. It'll be at HP Lovecraft Film Festival next weekend. It'll be everywhere, like right now. And well, I think you said you talked to Cody about this book
Yeah,
already.
yeah. He gave us sort of just the brief rundown. We got the kind of the Hollywood noir strangeness.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, Cody himself is an actor. I don't know if you talked to him about that, but he has done background acting in different things in Hollywood, and he's not doing it anymore, and he has real reasons because his opinion of people in Hollywood is not nice, and and this book really reveals that in an entertaining fictional way. So it's like a guy who is, you know, trying to save a damsel in distress through this interdimensional, all these different psychedelic Hollywoods, and it tells these crazy stories. But underlying it is all some kernel of truth about, you know, Scientology, about the way that extras are treated in Hollywood, about what it's like to work with an agent, about the just sort of existential dread of being an aspiring actor. And so it's really worthwhile reading because it's not only entertaining, but it has a real depth to it. And Cody's just a fantastic writer. I'm sure that your fans probably are familiar with him because he's been around in the H.P. Lovecraft circles for a long time. He writes a lot of mythos stuff too. But this one, I would say it does have, it touches and it has some mythos inspiration, but it's definitely a different kind of a book.
Awesome. And then it looks like God's Mean Older Brother also was recently dropped.
Yeah, God's Mean Older Brother by G. Arthur Brown. Oh, yeah, I've got that one too. Thanks for asking. I don't have them all just sitting on my desk, but I happen to have those two. Oh, and I also have I have Unlanguage by Michael Sisko. Have you heard
That was
about
going to be
that
the next
one?
one I went to. There we go.
Wow. All right. Well, those ones are really amazing. Yeah, Mean Older Brother is a comedy, and I mean it's just what it sounds like. It's God, but he's got a mean older brother, and he's you know, he's kind of the more in charge person. God's kind of whiny, and yeah, it's a really funny book. Unlanguage by Michael Sisko is a very unique kind of a book. You can see that it's a different size than anything I've published before. It's actually laid out like a grammatical, um, uh, like a guide to syntax of this language, and it's a very experimental and unusual and heady kind of like intellectual read, and it kind of feels like drugs. Like
Okay.
you'll read it and you'll kind of, as I was describing before, like something happened to my brain when I first read bizarre fiction for it's like that. It'll have a strange effect on your brain, and it actually in a way plays with the reader, where it's not only a guide to the grammar of this language, but it's also uh, you know, got a story narrative woven through it, and then you as the reader kind of become a part of the book almost in like a never-ending story kind of a way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's about the language that exists kind of between other languages, you know, like the subtext or the things that are unspoken that exist in language. It's got its own grammar. And this man who he tried to commit suicide, and he was exposed to this, and now he's trying to find his way back through this book. So yeah.
Fantastic. And do you have any more books coming out this year, or that seems to be all you have on your up and coming website? But
Yeah, I do have a couple of updates to that. There's also going to be a book called The Kaiju Kid by Shane Mackenzie, and it's an adorable coming of age story about a young kaiju who really sucks at being a giant monster.
Oh,
And yeah, it's really cute. So, you know, he he gets kicked out of the family by his dad because he's such a disgrace, and then he ends up learning that his grandfather is like the greatest kaiju of all time, and so his mom takes him to this grandfather to learn how to be a real monster.
Is
And
this some sort of bizarre Godzuki apology? Because I don't know if I'm down with that. I can deal with baby Jesus butt plugs, but if this is somehow trying to make us feel better about like Godzuki, that might be too far.
I don't know about that. You'll have to ask Shane if he was inspired by Godzuki.
Well, that's
Oh,
fantastic.
oh, and then there's another Carlton Mellick the third book coming out, called The Boy with a Chainsaw Heart, and that one is also kind of a anime. And well, I wouldn't say Godzilla's anime necessarily, but it's a um, mech anime where people
Oh
ride in
yeah,
the mechs, giant mechs.
yeah,
Well, so it takes place in hell, where
like you do.
yeah, heaven and hell are nations in this country. There's other countries too, like where different other religions have colonized their afterlives, and the people that are in those afterlives are essentially the slaves of the rulers, the ruling gods. And so this guy ends up in hell, and he is put into this demonic woman. She's this giant woman, and it turns out that the damned souls are what fuels these mechs. And so and his soul happens to be a chainsaw, so that's her special ability weapon, and they have to fight in a war, and he's trying to win back his lover and stuff like that. So it's a really exciting adventure in hell story.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that definitely stuff to look forward to. For those of us here who may not be used to Bizarro, I see you have a Bizarro starter kit. Can you tell us about that?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. So we have a few different editions of the Bizarro starter kit. Yeah, oh well, I'm connected to my computer, so I can't reach them. But they're anthologies designed essentially to introduce people to Bizarro fiction and what it's all about. And each one, there's 4 of them, have 10 authors, work by 10 different authors. And so you can really get exposed to those people's work. And if you like it, then, they all have other books that are out there. And then there's also the best Bizarro fiction of the decade, which I'd love to draw people's attention to, because that one is like the Bizarro starter kit, and only it's a little bit broader, and it encompasses the first 10 years of the Bizarro fiction genre and what editor Cameron Pierce selected as the best of the decade. And that one is one of our most popular sellers, and it has people in it that are kind of like writing Bizarro stories, but maybe you don't necessarily think of as Bizarro, like Joe Lansdale. Or it has there's a couple other people in it too that were surprises, and then some of the regular faces. So it's a great introduction to the genre as the best Bizarro fiction of the decade as well.
Fantastic. All right. And now I'd like to hear a bit about Bizarro Con, which you guys are putting on next year.
Yeah, so it'll be the 11th year of BizarroCon, which is it's the biggest. It's not big. It's like 110 people or so, but it's a gathering of the Bizarro fiction community. It's authors and publishers, editors, artists, musicians, and creators who all come together at McMenamin's Edgefield, which I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's this beautiful property that is in Troutdale, Oregon, and it's in the Columbia River Gorge, and it's on this 5 acres of property that is a winery, brewery, distillery, and hotel. And so we have that there for the weekend, and we have workshops. This year's special guests are Grady Hendrix, the author of Horror Store and My Best Friend's Exorcism and Paperbacks in Hell. And so, and just recently, what is his? We Sold Our Souls. Yeah, so those are his books. He's an amazing guy. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Raymond.
Paperbacks in Hell is an amazing project, and I think because of that, they're actually like relaunching a bunch of those old stories. Like he managed to get enough
Yes.
interest in it. So
Yeah, so I met him this year at StokerCon, and I mean, I've been a fan of his work, but he really blew me away as someone who is just an amazing human being and has a lot to offer to other writers as far as advice and sort of just his enthusiasm and spirit. I just love. So I've invited him out to BizarroCon as our special guest this year. Our musician guest of honor is Andrew Goldfarb, the Slow Poisoner, who comes every year, and his music is amazing. You should definitely check it out. It's like swamp-inspired psychedelic rockabilly kind of stuff from San Francisco, and his work, actually, you would specifically, I think, really enjoy it. He's a triple threat creator. He's also an author that I've published books by, but he's a comic book artist, and he does his own illustrations, and then he's a one-man band.
Oh, wow.
And when he does his one-man band act, he actually is a storyteller. So his songs are stories, and then he has illustrations that go along with them that he creates big placards of and like walks you through. And his persona is this sort of like snake oil salesman, voodoo, like swampy guy. I don't know. You got to check out his website, theslowpoisoner.com, and listen to all his music. But he'll be up at BizarroCon, and then we'll have workshops taught by John Skip and Mary San Giovanni, who's an amazing author from Pennsylvania, author of Thrall and a bunch of horror stuff. And we have Brian Allen Carr, who's another well-known author in our scene, who's doing amazing stuff, and Cameron Pierce. So we have workshops, we have panels, we have readings, we have great parties, and it's a lot about it's really a community building event for people to connect with like-minded individuals, share their love of bizarro fiction, and enjoy a bunch of good food and beer and each other's company and learn a lot of stuff. So that's what we do.
That sounds fantastic. Well, Rose, thank you so much for coming on the show, for being on after Ask Lovecraft After Dark. If folks are interested in following Eraserhead Press or following your work, where are the best places to go?
You can go to eraserheadpress.com, and that'll connect you up with our Facebook and Twitter and whatever other places that we are. I'd also encourage you to check out some of our books and subscribe to our newsletter and see me on Facebook, Rose O'Keefe. So yeah, all those places.
And I almost just buried the lead in all of this. Congratulations, because y'all just won a major press award, the 2017 Specialty Press Award. I believe you and the Independent Legions Publishing won, but congratulations for that. That's a huge achievement.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, that was such an honor, and it's exciting to be in that company.
Well done. Well, thank you again for being on the show. If folks are interested in following Ask Lovecraft After Dark, you can go to asklovecraft.com, which is our YouTube landing site, which has all of these episodes lined up. You can see all of our previous interviews with people who have been involved, Molly Tanzer and Cody Goodfellow and numerous other writers, the Callahans who we talked about earlier this evening. If you'd like a chance to be part of the live conversation, please join the Ask Lovecraft Appreciation Society on Facebook, a delightful coterie of attractive and discerning individuals who like all things strange and bizarre. Rose, thank you again for being on the show, and thank you to everyone in the chat, and I'll see you all later. Bye.